Okay, it's 2 minutes past, so I will open with a karakia, um, and then we will move swiftly on to this iPEN free webinar on the novel uses of program logics, which I'm super excited about, and I hope you get lots out of it too. Okay. Kia ora te marino, kia whakapapa pounamu te moana. Hei huri ahi mā tātou e te rangi nei. Aroha atu, aroha mai, tātou e a tātou katoa. Hui e, taiki e. Right, so I think most of you will know that the way that this free session is going to run is we've got 3 separate sort of presentations. The first is from Scion. We'll be hearing from Claire and Dougie about how they've been using program logics. Then I'm going to share a pre-recorded presentation from Ag Research from Christy Benson, and then we'll be handing over to Nicola Park from Plant and Food. And then once we've heard from all of them, then we'll spend the rest of the time just on questions. So if you've got any burning questions around how people have used things, or oh, that was really interesting, save them up for the end, and hopefully we can have a really good chat afterwards. So otherwise, over to you, Claire and Dougie.
Awesome, thank you for that introduction, Cara. Kia ora tātou. As Cara said, my name's Claire Stewart, and I'm one of 11 portfolio leaders here at Scion. So with portfolio leadership, the projects nest within the portfolios, and then we run a matrix here. So the people, the engine room who do the science and research sit within our research groups. So that's me, and this is Dagmar.
Kia ora tātou, Dagmar Cheeseman. So by trade, I'm a geneticist, so I've lived the full dream of being a scientist in Germany as well as here in New Zealand. But about 3 or 4 years ago, I changed over to operational and project delivery management. So I'm today here with my project delivery hat on, but we'll complement, first of all, Claire's slides in a little bit.
Fantastic. I'll just orientate towards me. The first part I will present, and then I'll hand over to Dougie. So wanted to talk to you today a little bit about the journey we've been on using program logics. So what we'll cover firstly is how we started that journey, and that was around using design thinking to actually uncover what are the problems that we need to solve. How we then took program logics and adapted it to work in a portfolio context, so a slightly higher level context, and then how we continue to work with program logics as a living tool in our work. So thinking about how we use design thinking and how that adapts in a science and research construct. So obviously, it's really important that we work really closely with our stakeholders and partners to understand what are all of the challenges, issues, and opportunities. So we brought all of our stakeholders and partners together. We went wide to understand, what's the opportunity space or the problem space. And we kind of contracted and expanded and went on this kind of wonderful journey over probably about a year period in total to actually come out with what are the programs that are going to get us from where we are now to our goals in 2030 and also beyond. So important in that process was not to put ourselves in the shoes of our stakeholders and partners. That can quickly lead to assumptive, unvalidated thinking. So it was critical that we actually brought them into the room and heard from their perspective what the critical challenges to solve were. So we were lucky enough to be able to run these fantastic co-design sessions across a really broad range of topics to unearth what those critical issues and challenges were, which for those who've worked with program logics at least will know it is kind of the first step of the process. What is the problem to solve? And then ultimately how are we going to solve it? So we managed to do this in and around COVID. So we had a lucky break and we ended up being able to bring people together. We also had to adapt into online setting, but in total we engaged over 200 stakeholders and partners to help us define our strategy to 2030 and beyond for Scion. So how we did that with that number of people in the room is we had little breakout spaces set up, and we created focusing questions. So we asked people to, I suppose, answer that question and directed them into what is the problem or opportunity space. And we also encouraged people around those focusing questions to imagine what a future would look like. So thinking if we answered the focusing question, what would we need to do in order for that to be true? How would we need to get there? And what would be the biggest challenges, but also the biggest opportunities if we achieved that? So by creating the focusing questions and asking people to imagine a future where we'd achieved that, we're able to focus people into actually starting to talk about the realities of how to get there. And unearthing those realities, you also hear what the problems and opportunities are. So it was a good approach to use. It enabled us to get a lot of information, and this slide really just depicts where we ended up. We've got, as I'm sure many of you do, a huge broad area of focus that we look at when we think about Scion as a whole. So we've got these 3 areas of impact, and under that we've got 11 portfolios. So when we brought together 200 stakeholders and partners, we heard all of the different challenges, and we were left feeling a little bit like the London Underground. We've got all these different pathways, they're intersecting in parts. How do we start to make sense of this information so that we can build programs off the back of it, and that we can start to have a conversation back with stakeholders and partners that doesn't leave them feeling really confused? So we started to look for tools or frameworks that we could use to start to make sense of this information. And that led us to Program Logics and engaging with Cara. We had obviously been using, as I'm sure many of you had, working with Program Logics at a project level, but working with them at a portfolio level presented a different challenge. So the way that we first, I suppose, started working with the template was in its typical form. So I'm sure you've all seen this, working from critical issues through to what's the long-term outcomes, and effectively how does that contribute to impact. We quickly found that was not quite fit for purpose. We needed a lot more detail in there, and we needed to be able to break out the impacts as well in more detail. So this was a first cut. What did it look like when we were trying to work with it in its current form? And that's when Cara really said to us, don't be constrained by the template. It doesn't have to be linear as it looks. Everything doesn't have to map perfectly across. It doesn't have to have the exact input areas. You can break it apart and work with it in order for it to be valuable in this context. So that was a pivotal moment, I think, for us in terms of use of the tool, and we started to evolve it. Now, I don't expect you to understand or be able to look at the detail of what's on here, but this is where I ended up for my portfolio. And I think importantly, what you can see at the high level is we've got critical issues on the left that then map directly into the research programs that are, how are we going to answer this critical issue? And so the program spaces, of which you can see I've got 4, all have nested projects. And so those were a combination of things we were already doing and also new things. What our board and our executive wanted to see is, okay, that's great, but what is Scion going to be doing towards that versus what our partners and stakeholders are going to be doing? Because there's a lot to do between now and 2030 and also beyond, and we know we're not going to do it by ourselves. So how do we describe what Scion's doing versus what external parties are doing and what the outputs are, and then what the outcomes will be? So that's how we adapted the template. You'll also see that getting out towards 2030 on the outcomes, you can see colours starting to blend together. And that was our way of saying you could just do this one program and you could get a great outcome. But if you did 3 of the programs, you're going to unlock a greater value at a higher level. And so that was our way of starting to build towards the bigger impact. So this has been a really useful tool for us to orientate firstly to our own organisation. How are we going to reach our strategy? what are the research programs that are going to get us there, and how do we need to work with stakeholders and partners to deliver on those. I'm going to hand over to Daggy now, who's going to give you the kind of more realistic view then of what did that mean for the teams. So we've done the strategy, and now we're starting to map in how the actual projects live inside Program Logics.
Thank you, Claire. So yeah, I want to actually now put first my project delivery hat back on by saying that it was amazing work that all the portfolios went through, but it is so complicated that if you haven't been part of the journey, it is really hard to jump on the train and be part of the rest of the journey, or wherever this train is actually taking Scion. And I also want to point out, while we're saying program logics, we actually want to use it as, or the template as a tool starting as a very simple project logic that has a purpose, and somehow then evolves and does speak to the portfolio logic maps. So the only way to really make it a living tool is allowing it to evolve. So first of all, now with a project leader hat on, you might find yourself on the situation where you think, amazing idea, that surely I want to know about it. Everybody wants to know about it. But I'm at Scion, so where are the science and research gaps? How do I now fit into those 11 complicated portfolio logic maps? There has been so much thinking, how do I fit? And those KPIs that we're currently updating for the organization, for the programs, does that speak to any of those? I really don't know where I belong. Do we have the capability? Well, we just restructured into research groups and portfolios. Who do I even ask to find out, do we have the capability? Or do I need to talk to our externals? But along the way, also me as a scientist, I want to be acknowledged. My project needs to be acknowledged. So how do I really explain what this is about and what we're trying to achieve? Anybody knows what I'm actually doing? And sometimes you might find yourself as an experienced scientist already asking, hey, my project will come to an end, maybe in 6 months, maybe in 5 years. Who looks after it afterwards? Because, well, funding is going to be cut. So now somebody's talking to me about a logic map. If you give me another tool, I'm probably going to lose the will to live, unless you explain to me there's a serious purpose behind it. So let's try that with the iPEN logic map, just as a baseline. We've decided to highly simplify it and just bring it down to as a thinking tool, probably during the proposal stage very often, and say, what are the critical issues that I'm looking at and what outputs could we have? And then we try to translate it. Which of those portfolios that we now have at Scion, does it line up, or does it need some massaging? Possibly it may talk to even more than just one portfolio logic map. So then you start more thinking already around, well, the impact and the benefits. Where does it really fit? And by that, we're hoping to really create a home for each project. And so, yeah, it's just shown. We're trying to really match it with all the work that has been done into the programs, into the portfolios, and already think about the afterlife in the implementation of all the project outputs. And I don't only want to talk about pure science projects, also want to consider their commercial and purely advisory projects. And I'm hoping with the next slide, I can point that out a little bit better. So here's, please don't try to read anything apart from the really bold letters at the top. So here we've been using one of our big MB projects that started a year ago, and practice on Claire's portfolio. How does that fit in through the whole journey, all the way through to Impact Drivers 2030? So we used the critical issues, lined them up where it sits within one of the programs, then decided, yep, it's a good match also with those outputs. We're well on track. But what we wanted to avoid is that when talking now to external partners, we have to do it for every project individually and use a lot of time for that. So hopefully, with Claire already talking to so many externals and being fully aware, what are their activities, what do they want to achieve, what outputs can they contribute, she will be already singing our song, blowing our drum, whatever you want to call it. It will take a lot of time away from our new project leader now having to do that themselves. And at the same time, we hope that we can not only tell our story, we can also have a really good understanding, well, what is actually right now needed for our partners? Are we on the right track? But then still we're coming back to our portfolio logic map, the outcomes and the 2030 impact driver. So hopefully after 5 years on that journey, the project is well looked after. It's okay if the funding ends, because maybe in the meantime, together with the portfolio leaders, we were able to already start a new proposal. So most of you will probably not be just a project leader for one project. So that is really important. Then if you're looking after 3 or 4 projects, you find yourselves part of multiple portfolios even, different leadership, different external stakeholders. So hopefully within those programs and the portfolios, we've also created home for you as a person. So the idea being there that you share the resources with other project leaders. You can again use those already existing communication and stakeholder platforms through the portfolios. This may be show and tells. This may be a, hey, you should present at that conference. You've got some cool results. Those guys want to hear about it, in case you didn't know already. So hoping that there, ultimately, we can create a project logic map at the very start for the thinking, but evolving it into a continued life within the portfolio logic map. And while I'm saying that last, certainly it's not least, the ultimate goal is that we actually allow our scientists, again, to have the time that what they were hired for and what their passion is, actually to do the science, rather than focusing on a lot of, one may call it admin, or lots of project management and stakeholder engagement, etc., etc. So I hope that that made more or less sense to everybody. I'm very happy to answer any questions. This is not set in stone at Scion. So yeah, any ideas or feedback are more than welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Daggy and Claire, just checking you can hear me okay now that I've switched devices. Cool. All right, so we're going to move on now to our pre-recorded presentation from Ag Research. So I'm going to share my screen, and if I can just get someone to give me a thumbs up and make sure you can hear it when I hit the play button, please. Can you hear that okay? Okay, bear with me for a moment. I'll do the other thing that I've done before. I'll just stop sharing and I'll try it again, and I'll just have to put myself on mute for a moment. Can you still hear me okay? Great, okay.
I'm Christy Benson. I'm a data engineer at Ag Research. Been at Ag Research for 3 years now, and in that time I was lucky enough to get shoulder tapped to be an Ag Research Impact Champion, which means that I was able to do the full suite of iPEN training with Cara. And as you'll see in this short presentation, I've really taken what I've learnt and flown with it and use it all the time. What I'd like to show you today are 2 examples of program logic in 2 very small internally funded SIF programs of work. So they were each $50,000 and quite short in length. In theory, 12 months, but with the funding process and things, it was kind of whittled down to about 5 months.
Yeah.
So I know that's quite, it might be a strange proposal to do a program logic for such a small program, but what we found was that because you have such a small pot of money and time is short, you need to make the most of it and be quite steely in your approach to make good use of the funding. So yeah, the inverse is that it's probably why you should do one.
Yeah, cool.
So yes, I'd like to show you the first one here. Hopefully you can see my screen. So this is a template that we built internally to show current baseline critical issues, moving all the way through to impacts. So this is a template on Miro that anyone can go in and pull and then start adding. So this is a natural language processing project. So the issue is that unstructured data in the internet, we usually get our hands on it by doing manual searches and pulling it back and then analysing it and then maybe getting some more. And it's a laborious process, heavy on manual labour and time, and you're almost not going to get a wide cast of everything. So is it representative? Yada yada. What we wanted to explore to put ag research in a more agile position, instead of perhaps being reactive, but being proactive and finding issues that farmers are having real time, and exploring opportunities. If we could create something, an app that would allow ag research to kind of be continually casting their net wide, pulling things back and analysis happening all of the time. So we really wanted to use the funding to explore how we would best create an app to do that. So yeah, obviously thinking about the current baseline and the critical issues in these yellow squares here, then we shoot over to impacts and have a good think about what we want to do. And how this was constructed was in a group. So we had some lovely people along. So we all got together and they were open to trying something like this. And I will just make the point that we had attained the funding, and then we went through this process because I think the timing of it, I hadn't completed the training or I wasn't a fully fledged impact champion. Otherwise, for sure, I would have done this before we had gone for funding. But luckily, we're able to get the funding without doing this up front. So then it was, okay, so let's have a think about, given the impacts that we want to achieve, what do we need to do to deliver that? So I approached this by first asking our little small project team whether they'd be interested in coming together, and they were fine about it. And it was really, really good. All different personalities in the project team. Some are realists, some are quite ambitious and maybe wrongly so, because I want to do everything and I want to do it yesterday. So it was really good having that balance of of perspective to actually put together something that's realistic. And so having this devised in a collaborative way meant that we could all get on board, and it could facilitate perhaps difficult conversations when trying to navigate scope and who does what. So working through this kind of in a systematic way, you know, of moving to the left, just very naturally in conversation, you know, assumptions, risks would pop up that we were able to kind of catch people saying that they were saying it consciously. So what this quickly became was a true north, if you will, something that we could always refer back to as a statement of work that we had informally agreed on, you know, like this is what we were going to do. You know, we'd carved out the scope consciously, allocated tasks, and, you know, doing that all in mind with what the ultimate impact should be. I will say that this process helped us to identify that we weren't going to end up at the end of 5 months with an app that someone could, you know, sit down and use. So that was a good reality check that actually this is a smaller project, which is a stepping stone to getting more funding, but that it can be used, you know, to cite, you know, oh, well, we should get more funding for this because these things that we created showed promise. And so that in itself was a good, you know, a good reality check, which I'm not sure if I was, you know, thinking about this on my own, I would have got to. So so that was good. And we found that coming back to this regularly was useful to have this all in one place, because the last, you know, 6 months at Ag Research of the financial year gets very busy. Obviously, everything's due in June, so you're really doing the project shuffle. You're doing this one day, you're doing the next. You're spread quite thin, and it's hard to remember all of the yummy details that you've worked through and negotiated with your team. So being able to pull this up, it's all here. So we don't have to rehash old ground to remember where we got to and why we're doing this. And this also becomes a bit of a gentleman's agreement in terms of if we were kind of veering off scope, you know, it could be used to pull us back on track. And because all of the, you know, assumptions and things are here, this kind of has embedded in it the reasons why we're doing these activities and delivering these outputs. So it kind of, it's self-referencing. So it has the what and the why all encoded in it. It's also really fun. I really love Miro, and so to have everyone kind of putting their own post-it notes in and generating that kind of discussion means that it's everyone owns it. It's not like a project plan where perhaps you create something and it kind of sits and collects dust. It's not so sexy a project plan as compared with something that can kind of capture a team's decision.
And what I love that you've added into this one, you've taken obviously in broad strokes the template that we share through the iPEN training, but you've included some other useful things like that current baseline piece, which is really helpful, and that who and the how down the bottom as well. So it's just a nice example from my point of view as well, just to show how you can take the guts of it, but then add a couple of extra pieces. So as you were saying before, certainly in the context of a very small project where you need to be as efficient as possible, you can sort of just have it there, you know, a bit like a snapshot, the photo, so that you're not going hunting for that information in other places.
Yeah, and so having everything in this one-stop shop means that it's a useful tool to not only, you know, use for the immediate team, but also for, you know, perhaps if your program, you know, sponsor is interested to see what you're doing. It's right here, and it's easily navigable. You know, you can weave the story through it. So it's also very, you know, palatable for a wider audience as well.
Okay, tell us about your second example, which is a little bit different.
Yes. So this again was funded, so 50K, within a 5-month window. What's different about this is that it was just me. But for all the same reasons why we did it for the natural language processing project, are all the reasons why I wanted to do it for me. You can kind of slam everything in, keep that focus on the impact. Of course, there are really amazing data visualizations that I wanted to explore, and cool tools that I wanted to have a tutu with. But ultimately, having that impact kind of there staring in your face, it's a good kind of self-control measure to be like, okay, small amount of money, small amount of time. You've got to hit what you promised, and so everything that you do should be an enabler, right?
Yeah.
Of achieving those outcomes and impacts. So this was about exploring data visualization and whether ag research can use data visualization to communicate complex science in very simple, palatable ways that the average Kiwi can look at, understand, and the idea is that ag research's public perception improves with that because we're suddenly more inclusive. So same process. Current baseline, critical issues, then shooting over to impacts and working back that way.
Cool. So, and I guess the only other kind of key thing it would be good to get from you for now is sort of thinking about, well, developing these up takes a bit of time, it's and so when we're making choices about how we're going to spend our time, if you were having a coffee with a colleague, they might say, well, why can't I just do X, Y, and Z? What's the value add of doing this? And so I'd be keen to get your thoughts on that in both cases, because one is obviously in a group setting, but then in this individual setting. So someone, devil's advocate, might say, oh, I already know it all in my head. I'll save that 1, 2, 3 hours and do X.
Yeah, I think in the long term, not working through this would actually create more work, because this process it brings up questions you didn't know that you had initially. For example, here, I would have said before we had done this, yes, we're going to create an app, and it might be tight, but I'm sure we can do it. I'm a hard worker, I know I can hit this. Whereas actually working through this with the perspectives of other people and just really breaking it down into chunks and then breaking that down into chunks, it was never going to happen. So I can only imagine what I would have done, 2 months away from the deadline. It would have been embarrassing. So I think that going through something like this makes you face all the uncomfortable facets of what you're trying to do, whereas maybe in your mind it's all roses kind of thing. So it's a good reality check, and it's also a tool where other people can add their perspectives if you're doing it with a group, which again can refine your own assumptions, and it just chips away at kind of the golden scenario that you might hold in your head, and allows it to be mapped out in a way that you can share with other people and ultimately funders. So I just think, and I just think particularly the ag research, we are spread quite thin. It would be amazing to have the confidence of having everything up here and keeping it up there, but I just don't think that's realistic. You can't remember every little thing, and also having it documented like that, other than the usefulness of the process by chipping away at things. You can reflect back on this, you know, in a couple of years, or you know, when you definitely won't have it still all up here, you know. So yeah, good documentation, you know, will save the day. And yeah, I can't, yeah, I almost feel like I'm panicking when I think about how would I have gone through this project without doing this. It would have ended up way more work trying to get out of the circles that we would have got ourselves into.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris.
All right. Okay. Lucky last. Over to Nicola. Welcome, Nicola from Plant and Food.
Hi everyone, this is going to be just a quick whiz through an example that a program logic that my team, my group have been working on. So if I jump right in and try and share this, let's just see how I go. No, that's not showing up. Let's give it another go.
Finding the blessed windows and screens.
It is. Okay, let's try that one. The only problem is you may or may not be on the right screen. We're about to find out.
If you just reverse your screens, then we'll see it.
Yep.
Display settings, I think it is.
What's it called?
Display
settings. Swap.
Yeah.
There we go.
Go. Perfect.
Got it. Okay, I'll look at the screen. All right, so my name's Nicola Park. I work at Plant and Food Research. I'm a research associate involved in entomology based in Hawke's Bay. And I also wear a number of other hats, and one of them is as a program coordinator, mainly working at Apple Research, but also more specifically in a Growing Futures program called Simulating Orchard Ecosystems. I've been lucky enough to be involved in quite a few iPEN trainings, and so Cara kindly got hold of me. She said, hey, how about telling everyone a little bit about the recent one that you've been working on? Normally, most of the program logics I've worked on have been sort of SFF type, the SFF futures type projects, which are an applied science space where you have quite a, I guess, a defined opportunity or issue that we're trying to sort out, along with some usually quite defined or stakeholder expectations around outputs and outcomes. This journey that I'm sharing today is one that our program has been working through within the Growing Futures, which is an SSIF program. This particular program, Simulating Orchard Ecosystems, sits within a Digital Horticultural Systems Growing Futures direction. So, yeah, during COVID time, started off with giant mirror board sessions. So this was like going out to everybody within Plant and Food saying, hey, you want to come and share some ideas around digital horticultural systems, but more specifically around simulating orchard ecosystems. And so we did that. We had a number of workshops on mirror boards. So now we've all learned about mirror boards. And following that, from those that were interested in sort of continuing the conversation, actually developing and actually running some workshops across what became 5 research aims within the program. And then next came the program logic. So once we had the ideas kind of roughly sort of in our heads and on Miro boards, it was actually going back and reviewing all the information that had been gathered and coming together and working through actually a program logic. So what did we do? So we were basically using the program logic as a way to group all this raft of range of ideas. There were about 10 of us that came online that all then actually largely went on to become research aim co-leads in the program as a structure came together. Coming back to the Miro boards, one of the things that I guess COVID did bring us is Miro boards, and the fact that we could actually engage right across all the different sites that Plant and Food is in all the different regions, and geographically actually come together for those large Miro board sessions, but then once again also to develop our program logic. So we had a really broad ranging topic. If you think about it, simulating orchard ecosystems, that brings in the whole orchard ecosystem environment. So we reviewed and ranked all the topics in the previous workshops and brought those discussions together for developing our program logic. The really important thing in all this is that we had a really competent, amazing facilitator, because this was a really big topic. And so this was super important and actually to try and bring those ideas together into a framework that we could then build on from there. So what did it look like? Well, don't expect you to actually be able to read this, but you can see it was quite extensive where we landed, and so we're actually still just basically just starting in our second year of the program. So we'll be looking at coming back and reviewing this and fine tuning it and refining as we have now further developed our research aims within the program. So what have some of the challenges been? Well, starting big, this made it really challenging. It was great that we had such an amazing array of ideas, but it then became really difficult to then bring that all together. So very challenging to understand the scope and imagine the activities that aligned with the wide range of potential issues and outcomes that we could have actually, could actually deliver to. It was a brand new team, so we've actually got very much a multidisciplinary team, and that's been another amazing, I guess it's a challenge, but also a strength of actually this program and the process that we've gone through. But it does take time to actually build and get everyone to get to know each other and build that supportive team to ensure also all the perspectives are heard and across all the range of disciplines that were involved. And time to debate, time to refine the research ideas in an iterative way. It's just can be a bit of a slow process at the start that sort of then gains momentum. There sometimes feels like it's going in circles. So the progress can be a little bit frustrating, but having something like a framework to actually work towards, you keep coming back to what is that shared vision to actually ground truth, bring us back to what are we actually trying to achieve. And that's where having a program logic and having gone through a relatively robust process in developing it is really important. So why was it good? It's collaborative. It did actually work at trying to bring those ideas together, and also for the team to actually build that a joint understanding of what we're actually wanting to do. I loved that it did cross all those multidisciplinary areas, and that geography wasn't a problem. We could actually definitely work together quite well online. And then discussion of ideas breeds more ideas, and we definitely were not short of ideas, and we still are not short of ideas. So what did we get out of this process? So by the end of the program logic session, I have to admit, we have and still have actually a bit of a blob that needs further refining. But we've come up with lots of tangible ideas that could be fitted into this program and potentially other directions as well. We've also developed an understanding of the scope of work that could be included to address the problems and challenges that we're looking at in this particular program. We also learned how to collaborate. We are now whizzes on Miro boards, and for many of the team, they actually haven't used program logics before. So that was also another learning curve. We now have an invaluable framework to actually bring a new multidisciplinary team of collaborators together. And we also have a framework for building and delivering our monitoring and evaluation plan too. So in the end, we've actually gained, I guess, a greater shared understanding of what we're trying to do and what we're trying to solve and the outcomes that we are hoping to create. So that was a very quick whiz through, I guess, pretty much my journey, but our team's journey on developing a program logic. And yeah, would welcome any questions. I'll
Awesome.
stop sharing when I find the right place.
Oh, thank you so much, Nicola, and to everyone, everyone who's contributed to today's session. So really now we've got the last 13 minutes just to ask any questions. We really wanted to make this session an opportunity to, to actually see what these, what this tool looks like in, in the real world. So yeah, really opening the floor to any questions. You can put your hand up on the, using the little emoji thingies. You can put questions in Slido, or you can type them into the chat. Dion's got a question. Dion, you're first cab off the rank, shoot.
Hello. Nicola, what would you do differently if you're going to do it again?
Not underestimate the amount of time it takes, not to be, I think at the end of the first going through the, because I've done program logic before, I sort of I wondered at the end of our session of going through the program logic, it seemed, like I said, like a bit of a blob. And revisiting that, I think how that happened was because I probably needed to better define the scope of what we're doing, but also not to be worried about it, because we can revisit that and go back and refine it. It's not something that's static, done, tick a box. We actually is a living document that we will revisit.
Thanks, Nicola. There's a question in Slido from Roxanne asking to you, Claire and Dougie, how are projects finding the process of fitting into the portfolio logics? Are they finding it helpful?
I would say it's a journey. If you've got a project delivery manager like Daggy, who's quite proactive with helping people navigate it, it's been good. I think probably one of the biggest challenges for us as the portfolio leadership is those areas of overlap, which there are, and us working to communicate to the teams how that can ultimately be a positive, and that you don't necessarily have to sit in one particular place, and how we can find that home for you, as Daggy described. So we probably need to work a little bit harder as the portfolio leadership to help people to understand that. I think once they can see the home, it works really well, but I think there has been some challenges in navigating because we've got such a broad range. How would you build on that?
Yeah, well, I think the key thing is really not to be too rigid about it. It doesn't always have to be exactly that template of a logic map, and it doesn't have to be the perfect match and highlight through then the portfolio logic map. The main thing is that a project leader with their idea has an opportunity to talk to the portfolio leaders, and there is a common understanding that there's value in the project. So again, it could be a conversation, it could be an email exchange, or you may find it useful to put it on paper into those logic maps one way or another.
It probably has been helpful in what we say no to, because I think we do a lot, and it's hard to say no to someone, and particularly if it's an area of passion. So it's probably given us an ability to have more focus towards our strategy, although we're still probably doing too much.
Thanks. Now, I think it was Katrine had her hand up.
Kia ora. Hi Claire, hi Dougie. I'm saying hi from the other side of campus. And might actually be a question for you too, but it's probably more a general one. I mean, quite impressive how you brought in all the stakeholders in that original mapping and planning. I'm always interested in, well, how do you then stay in touch and evaluate that your program is actually delivering that outcome? So specifically, if we're talking about some very longer time frames, design thinking is all around creating something, then taking it back, testing it, and refining it, and working with your stakeholders. How are you envisaging to do that going forward, or maybe any of the other speakers, have you done that? So it's not just, you don't just engage at the beginning and then you deliver something. that where actually trajectory might change over the course of the years and the needs may change as well.
I'll briefly answer that, but maybe Nicola has also got a perspective. I would love to be able to do what we did at the beginning on a more of an always-on basis. So how we do that kind of co-design, design thinking more regularly in shorter formats. I think that is the role of portfolio leadership, is to actually be out there keeping, finger on the pulse in terms of that. And the programs give us the ability to do that at a slightly higher level, because otherwise, I've got, say, 16 projects under 4 programs. It's easier to pulse check at a program level. So that's how I would do it. We're doing that in a way by being out with industry, on a daily basis. But I think having the co-design format would be another great way to do that. Nicola, would you add a perspective from your side on that?
Yeah, so a couple of different things. One is, yes, refining. Yeah, definitely. It's not I definitely don't see it as program logic as something that just sits and done, and you do need to come back and revisit. It's also a key, the key starting place for developing the monitoring and evaluation plans, so actually just to see how the program is tracking. And if it is changing direction, if it's deliberate, that's fine, but it's actually recognising that that's happening, and that's a need, and that's potentially a point where you need to come back and actually revisit that program logic and to see that it is actually still fit for purpose. As far as working with stakeholders, I've probably done that more with some of the SFF type projects, where we have actually jointly developed the program logic so that everybody has a shared vision of right from the start as to what the outcomes of the project are, so that if it changes as iterations of the research actually happen, then again it's a joint decision to actually do that.
Yeah, I'm just going to add one more thing, and then we've got another question. But one of the great things, if you've involved your stakeholders in the development of your program logics, it makes that checking back in with them process a lot more efficient. And it also gives you a bit more of a structure. So if you have a change possibly at a project or a program level, it's kind of easier to see, hey, it's changed in this at this level. Now, does that kind of sort of propagate up to the program and the portfolio level in Sion's case, or is that more of a sort of unique to that particular project? So again, it can often give you a bit more structure and a bit more efficiency to kind of keeping across those sorts of changes, as well as just allowing that kind of checking in process to be a bit more efficient. Ross has got a question, and this would be to everyone. Just briefly as well, Anne-Marie is joining us from Ag Research as the rep for Christie. So if you do have any questions about Christie's projects, then you're welcome to direct them to Anne-Marie, because she's been really closely involved with her. But Ross was wondering, are you finding that other people in your organisation seeing you do logics and or participating in them is inspiring them to use them as well?
Maybe I go first, because I then also need to run, if that's all right.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't go as far as that people are waiting excitedly in the corners like, oh, when do I get to do my program logic map? We are in baby shoes with that scenario, because again, the portfolio logic maps are quite daunting, and and that is really important for me. We do have to prove that they have a purpose, and that purpose and that value is continued. So I think we do need a few showcase projects that of several sizes. So the little ones, like a commercial ones or advisory, all the way through the big MB endeavors, and show a little bit, hey, actually, this has been part of the journey and has allowed everyone to get back to the ground level understanding, yep, this is why we're doing it, or we changed direction because something else changed and we were informed by the portfolio.
Yeah.
So hopefully we get there, but not just yet.
Claire, did you have anything to add?
No, I think that answers it quite well. I think we recognised that even in practicing for this and delivering this, we should actually probably do this for our own team. So yeah, I think you all understand, you get on the hamster wheel of you know, doing what we do. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, sometimes you need to slow down and bring people on the journey a little bit as well. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Anne-Marie, what have you observed any little propagation outwards off the back of the work that Christy was involved with?
I think the big bit is the template that she created in Miro for us. I've used that a lot, and I'm going to be encouraging all to know that we've got Miro set up. I think that really streamlines the process.
Yeah.
Also, just the fact that she was quite passionate in showing others that it can be used in quite small ways. That can be really helpful for the smaller projects. I think that's what's changing. It's changed my mindset when I saw her do it. Not just for the big, complicated programs.
Yeah.
That it can be really helpful for.
Yeah. Nicola, did you have anything to add?
I think probably there is I guess a growing, definitely a much wider awareness of program logics. I think probably the value more is as and how they can be used. So yes, as a planning tool to start with, but it's I guess the greater value is actually how they can be used later, and it's around that monitoring evaluation, but much more awareness around measures of impact. And so if you've got an evaluation plan and then some way of actually capturing that data, yes, definitely a much heightened awareness more probably in that space.
Yeah, and I think the one before we close off, because we have a couple of minutes to go, I think the other thing that we just need to remind ourselves is that this process, it's a marathon, not a sprint. But what makes it so much easier, less daunting, and gives people confidence is seeing these different ways that it can be used and for slightly different things. So on that point, I just want to say a huge thank you to Claire and Daggy and Nicola and Christy and Anne-Marie for and Stuart as well in the background helping Nicola, because it's these examples that is what helps the most. So massive thanks to you all on behalf of the iPEN team. Yeah, really, really thank you. For those of you who are still on the line, this has been recorded, so if you want to go back and look at anything again, you can, or if there's any colleagues that you think missed this but would have liked to have joined, then we'll be sharing the link in the next few days once we've got it loaded up online. But otherwise, thank you very much, and I will just close with a karakia and hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. Kia tau kia tātou katoa, te atawhai o te runga rawa, te aroha o tētahi ki tētahi. Me ngā manaakitanga o te wā, humie huie, tai ki e.
Thank you.
Have a great day, everybody.